90 doctors failed to save the Mafia boss's daughter, but then, out of nowhere, a cleaning lady's son walked in and did the impossible. What happened next? It shocked the entire city. Let's continue this story. The screams echoed through the marble halls of the Rossi mansion. It was midnight, but every light in the place was blazing. Men in suits ran up and down the staircase. Doctors shouted medical terms, and in the center of it all was Antonio Rossi, the most feared mafia boss in all of New York. His empire stretched across cities, but tonight, he was just a desperate father. His daughter, Isabella, lay pale and still on the velvet bed, her breathing shallow, her pulse fading like the last flicker of a dying candle. 90 doctors, the best money could buy, had already tried. None of them could save her. Please do something. Antonio roared, grabbing one of the doctors by the collar. His voice cracked, his eyes bloodshot. The doctor shook his head helplessly. Mr. Rossi, we've tried everything. The infection has spread to her brain. There's nothing left. He didn't finish. Antonio shoved him aside, his fists trembling. Get out. All of you, get out. The hall emptied. Silence fell, heavy and cold. Antonio sank beside his daughter's bed, clutching her hand. For the first time in 20 years, the man who had made cities tremble cried. His empire couldn't save her. His power meant nothing. Down in the basement, mopping the marble floors, was a woman named Mariah. She was the cleaning lady, quiet, kind, invisible to most of the mansion. But tonight, she heard the crying. She hesitated at the stairs, holding her mop, her heart aching. Everyone in the mansion knew Isabella, sweet, polite, always smiling. Mariah had watched her grow up, and now, she could hear her struggling for breath. She whispered to herself, God, please help her. Just then, the kitchen door opened. Her teenage son, Elijah, stepped in. 16 years old, tall, dark-skinned, eyes bright with curiosity and intelligence far beyond his age. He was waiting for his mother to finish her shift. Mom, he said softly, is it true? Mr. Rossi's daughters die. Mariah nodded, her eyes sad. Yes, baby. 90 doctors came. None could help her. Sometimes, even money can't fight fate. Elijah frowned. What's wrong with her? Some kind of infection. It's attacking her brain. They said no cure. He fell silent, thinking. For years, Elijah had been obsessed with science. He read medical journals, watched lectures online, and spent nights building strange devices from scrap. His teachers called him a genius. But genius had limits, especially when you were the son of a cleaning lady in a mafia boss's house. Still, something inside him stirred. He said quietly, Mom, can I see her? Mariah froze. Elijah, no. You can't just walk in there. That's the boss's daughter. If something happens, please, Mom, he interrupted. I just want to look. Maybe I can help. Mariah's heart pounded. She wanted to say no, but the desperation in his voice made her pause. Finally, she sighed. Fine, but don't say a word. Just look from the door. They crept upstairs. The guards were gone, the mansion quiet. Through the half-open door, Elijah saw Isabella. Her skin was grayish, her breathing shallow, tubes and monitors surrounding her. Antonio sat by the bed, his head in his hands. Elijah studied the machines, the readings, the faint odor of medicine in the air. Something wasn't right. He whispered to himself, they're treating the wrong thing. Mariah touched his arm nervously. Elijah, let's go. But before they could move, Antonio's voice thundered. Who's there? Mariah froze. The mafia boss stood, eyes red, gun in hand. Who are you? Mariah dropped to her knees. Please, sir. It's just me, Mariah. I clean here. My son didn't mean to. Antonio glared at Elijah. You brought your kid into my house. My daughter's dying, and you. Elijah stepped forward. His voice didn't shake. Sir, I'm sorry, but I think I know what's wrong with her. The room fell silent. Antonio stared. Then he laughed, bitterly. You? You think you know more than 90 doctors? You're what, 16? Get out before I… Please, sir. Elijah said again, steady and calm. Just let me explain. I saw the machines. Her pulse is uneven. Her pupils dilate when they shouldn't. That's not just infection, it's toxin buildup. I read about this in a medical paper last year. Antonio's laughter stopped. He turned slowly. Toxin. Elijah nodded. Yes, it mimics brain infection symptoms. Antibiotics won't work. She needs a detoxifier, but not the common ones. There's a specific protein compound that neutralizes it. I can make it. Mariah whispered. Elijah, stop. But Antonio's eyes were locked on him. For a long moment, silence. Then, he said quietly, if you're wrong, boy, I'll bury you myself. Elijah didn't flinch. Then I better not be wrong. Antonio gestured. Do it. Mariah gasped. Sir, he's just a child. Antonio looked at her with hollow eyes. 90 doctors failed. What do I have to lose? Elijah took a deep breath and stepped toward Isabella's bed. The monitors beeped weakly. He whispered, hang in there. He looked around the room, scanning for supplies, saline, carbon filters, medical vials. His mind worked like lightning. Years of studying biology online came rushing back. He grabbed a few items, mixed a solution in a glass dish, his hands trembling but precise. Mariah watched in horror, whispering prayers. Antonio watched too, torn between rage and desperate hope. Elijah drew the liquid into a syringe and said, this might sting. He injected it carefully into Isabella's foreline. Seconds felt like hours. The monitors beeped. Once, twice, then steadied. Isabella's breathing deepened. Her color returned slightly. Mariah gasped. Oh my God, Antonio froze. He leaned closer, his voice shaking. She's breathing normal? Elijah nodded slowly. If I'm right, the compound will keep neutralizing the toxin. She'll wake up soon. Antonio turned toward the boy, his expression unreadable. The man who ruled the underworld was speechless before a cleaning lady's son. For the first time that night, there was hope. The minutes crawled by like hours. The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the hum of the machines. Antonio Rossi stood frozen, his jaw tight, watching the monitor like it held his soul. The flat, weak line that had terrified him for days was now pulsing steadily. Isabella's breathing deepened, her chest rising and falling in rhythm. For the first time in weeks, her lips had a hint of color. Mariah covered her mouth in shock, tears brimming in her eyes. Elijah, what did you do? She whispered. The boy didn't look up. His hands were still steady as he adjusted the foredrip. I just gave her a neutralizer. The toxin should break down within the next few hours. Antonio stepped forward, his face unreadable. He towered over Elijah, a man feared by hundreds, standing before a boy who should have been invisible. What kind of toxin? He demanded. Elijah hesitated. I think someone poisoned her. The words hit like a bullet. Antonio's face darkened. Poisoned? Elijah nodded slowly. It mimics a rare bacterial infection, so doctors keep treating it the wrong way. But I saw signs. Discoloration under her fingernails, irregular nerve responses, brain inflammation without fever. That's not infection. It's deliberate. For a long moment, Antonio didn't speak. Then his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You're saying someone tried to kill my daughter? Elijah didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. Antonio's fists clenched, rage burning in his eyes. Who would dare? He turned toward the door and barked. Marco, bring every security feed from the last week. Now, the guards rushed off. Mariah grabbed Elijah's hand. We should go, she whispered. We've done enough. But Antonio turned sharply. No, you're not going anywhere. Mariah froze. Please, sir. He was only trying to help. Antonio cut her off, his tone calm but commanding. I'm not punishing him. I'm thanking him. And until my daughter wakes up, you both stay here. Under protection. Mariah looked at her son, scared but proud. Elijah stood quietly, glancing at Isabella's steady heartbeat. She'll be fine, he said softly. Hours passed. Outside, the city slept while inside the Rossi mansion, the air buzzed with tension. Guards ran up and down, cameras flickered, screens replayed footage. And at the center of it all, Antonio paced like a caged lion. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward the bedroom door. Finally, a soft sound came from inside. A cough. A weak whisper. Papa! Antonio froze. The word hit him like lightning. He rushed inside, and there she was. Isabella, eyes half open, looking around in confusion. Papa, what happened? Antonio dropped to his knees beside her bed, grabbing her hand. My princess, you're alive. His voice broke as tears rolled down his face. He kissed her forehead over and over. You're safe now. You're safe. Mariah covered her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. Elijah stood by the door, his heart pounding, a shy smile breaking through his usual calm. Antonio turned to him, tears in his eyes. You saved my daughter's life. Elijah said quietly. She just needed the right treatment. Antonio rose, his expression fierce and determined. No, you did what 90 trained doctors couldn't. You saw what they missed. You're a genius. Elijah looked down, embarrassed. I just read a lot, sir. My mom always says learning is free, even if school isn't. Antonio glanced at Mariah, who wiped her tears. Your son deserves better than cleaning floors in my house. That night, the Rossi mansion transformed. The guards, the cooks, everyone whispered about the miracle. The boss's daughter, healed by the janitor's son. It sounded like something out of a movie, but it was real. The next morning, Antonio summoned them both to his private office. Mariah entered nervously, clutching her apron, while Elijah stood tall beside her. Antonio sat behind a mahogany desk, sunlight streaming in through massive windows. Sit, he said. They did. Antonio leaned forward, hands clasped. I had my men look into what you said about the poison. You were right. My chemist confirmed it. Someone used a neurotoxin developed in Eastern Europe, impossible to detect through normal tests. You saved her life, Elijah. And you exposed a traitor. Mariah gasped. A traitor? Antonio nodded grimly. Someone close to me. One of my own men. He's been taken care of. His tone made it clear what that meant. Then he looked back at Elijah. Tell me, boy, what do you want? Money? A scholarship? Name your price. Elijah shook his head slowly. I don't want money. I just want a chance to study. To become a real doctor one day. Antonio leaned back, surprised. That's it. Elijah smiled faintly. That's all. For a long moment, Antonio said nothing. Then he stood, walked around the desk, and placed a heavy hand on Elijah's shoulder. You remind me of someone I used to be, before I lost my soul to power. His voice softened. You'll get your chance. From this day, you're under my protection. I'll pay for your education, anywhere in the world. Mariah gasped, her eyes wide. Sir, you don't have to. Antonio cut her off gently. No, Mariah, I do. Because your son did what no one else could. You gave me back my daughter. I owe you everything. Elijah's heart raced. Thank you, sir. I won't waste it. Antonio smiled faintly. I know you won't. And one more thing. From now on, no one in this house will ever treat you or your mother like servants. You saved my blood. Your family now. Mariah broke down in tears, covering her face. For years, she had scrubbed those marble floors, invisible to everyone. Now, the most powerful man in the city was standing before her, thanking her son. Outside the office, the guards watched silently, some in disbelief, some in awe. The story would spread. The cleaning lady's son who healed the Mafia boss's daughter. But deep inside the Rossi mansion, another story was just beginning. Because what Elijah didn't know yet was that saving Isabella's life had placed him in the middle of a world more dangerous than any he could imagine. And the people who wanted her dead had just found out who stopped them. Days passed, and the Rossi mansion slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Guards at the gates, cars gliding in and out, the smell of expensive cigars and danger always in the air. But something inside had changed. The air felt lighter. Laughter had returned. Isabella, still recovering, often sat in the garden, sunlight warming her pale skin. And beside her, almost every day, sat Elijah. He was shy at first, unsure how to act around the daughter of a mafia boss, but Isabella had a kindness about her that made him feel at ease. You really saved me, she said one afternoon, her voice soft, eyes bright. They told me 90 doctors gave up, but you didn't. Elijah shrugged modestly. I just saw what others missed. Guess I was lucky. She smiled. That's not luck. That's talent. Genius. He laughed nervously. I'm just the son of a cleaning lady. She shook her head. No, you're the boy who brought me back from the dead. Titles don't define genius, Elijah. They talked for hours about life, books, science, music. Isabella was fascinated by how Elijah's mind worked. He could explain complex things in simple ways. One moment he'd talk about neurons, the next he'd compare them to city traffic lights. She found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in months. From the terrace, Antonio Rossi watched them. The sight made him smile, something else he hadn't done in a long time. He called Mariah to his office later that day. Your boy, he said, lighting a cigar, he's special. You know that, right? Mariah nodded. He's always been curious. Reads everything he can get his hands on. Even fixed an old hospital machine once from YouTube videos. Antonio chuckled. He reminds me of myself, before I chose the streets instead of school. He took a long puff and exhaled slowly. I'm enrolling him in the best private academy in the city. Full scholarship. No arguments. Mariah's eyes filled with tears. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Don't, Antonio said simply. You already have. That evening, Elijah came home to find his mother crying. Happy tears this time. When she told him what Antonio had done, he could hardly believe it. An academy? Me. Mariah smiled proudly. You earned it, baby. God works in mysterious ways. Elijah hugged her tight. I won't waste it, Mom. I promise. The next morning, he began classes at St. Augustine Academy, a school filled with polished cars, designer clothes, and last names that opened doors. He didn't fit in, not at first. Some students laughed at his worn shoes, whispered about his mother being a cleaning lady. But Elijah ignored them. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to learn. Every day, he studied harder than anyone. His teachers were stunned by how quickly he grasped concepts, how his ideas often went beyond the textbooks. Within months, his grades topped the entire school. He became known as the Miracle Kid. Meanwhile, Isabella continued to recover, but not everything was peaceful. Antonio's enemies had noticed the miracle too. Rumors spread through the underworld. The Rossi girl lived, they whispered. Some genius boy cured her. And among those whispers was one dangerous question. Who poisoned her in the first place, and why? One night, as Antonio sat in his study going over ledgers, Marco, his right-hand man, entered quietly. Boss, we found something, he said, sliding a file across the desk. Antonio opened it. Photographs, documents, wire transfers. His eyes narrowed. This can't be right. It is, Marco said grimly. The poison came from inside. One of our own men, working for the Santino family. They wanted Isabella gone to break you. Antonio's jaw tightened. And the boy, Elijah, he stopped their plan. Marco nodded. Which means the Santinos might come after him next. Antonio's face hardened. Over my dead body. That same night, while Elijah was studying in his small apartment room, someone knocked on the door. Mariah answered. 2 guards stood there. Mr. Rossi sent us, one said. We're here for your protection. Mariah frowned. Protection? From what? The guard glanced at Elijah. From people who don't like what he did. Elijah froze. What do you mean? The man's voice was low. You saved the wrong girl, kid. And now, someone wants revenge. Within minutes, they were escorted to a safe house, a secure mansion outside the city. Mariah was terrified, but Antonio assured her on the phone, You're under my protection. No one touches you or your son. Still, Elijah couldn't sleep that night. He stared out the window, the moonlight shining on his face. Mom, he whispered, maybe I shouldn't have helped. Mariah turned from the couch, eyes soft but firm. Don't ever say that. You saved a life. You did what God sent you to do. The danger isn't your fault. It's theirs. The next day, Antonio came to visit personally. He looked tired, angry, but relieved they were safe. Elijah, he said seriously, you're part of my family now. That means my enemies will see you as a target. I'll make sure they never reach you. Elijah nodded. Thank you, sir. But maybe I can help. Antonio frowned. Help? You're a kid, not a soldier. Elijah shook his head. Not with guns. With science. If someone used poison once, they might do it again. I can create a way to detect it, instantly. No one else should suffer like Isabella did. Antonio stared at him for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You really are something else, kid. Fine. Whatever you need, I'll get it. Over the next weeks, Antonio gave Elijah access to a lab inside one of his properties, fully equipped. And there, surrounded by beakers, wires, and test tubes, the cleaning lady's son began his next mission. He was going to build a device that could detect toxins instantly, something even hospitals didn't have yet. A tool that could save lives, and perhaps, one day, change the world. But in the shadows, others were watching. The Santino family had learned his name, and they had a plan. Because if they couldn't kill Antonio Rossi's daughter, they would kill the boy who saved her. The wind howled outside the Rossi estate that night, rain beating against the tall glass windows. Elijah's lab lights glowed faintly in the dark, casting long shadows across the room. Inside, he was lost in his work, his hands steady, his mind racing. He had built a crude prototype, a small handheld scanner that could detect chemical toxins in seconds. He called it the Guardian. Just a few more adjustments, he muttered, tightening a wire. The machine beeped, a soft green light blinking. It works, he whispered, smiling. At that very moment, across town, a black SUV rolled silently through the rain. Inside, 4 men sat, cold eyes, heavy weapons, no emotion. The Santino family had sent their best. Their mission was simple: find the boy, end it quietly. Back at the safe house, Mariah made tea, glancing at the clock. It's almost midnight, baby. You should rest. Elijah shook his head, still focused on his device. Can't stop now, Mom. If I perfect this, it could save more people. Maybe even stop whoever did this in the first place. Mariah sighed, proud but worried. You're just like your father, she whispered. Elijah looked up. I never knew him. She smiled sadly. You have his fire. He was a good man. He would have been proud. Before he could respond, a sharp click echoed outside. Elijah froze. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the metallic click of a gun being loaded. Mom, he said quietly, turn off the lights. Mariah obeyed instantly, her instincts sharp. The room plunged into darkness. Elijah peeked through the curtains. 2 shadows moved near the gate. The guards Antonio had sent were gone. The realization hit hard. They took out security, he whispered. Then boom. The front door exploded off its hinges. Get down, Elijah shouted, pulling his mother to the floor as bullets ripped through the living room. Glass shattered, furniture splintered. From the outside, a man shouted, grab the boy. The boss wants him alive. Heart pounding, Elijah grabbed his mother's hand and crawled toward the lab door. He hit a switch, activating the emergency lock Antonio had installed. Metal shutters slid down over the windows with a heavy clang. Mom, stay here, he said breathlessly. No, Elijah, don't. I have to distract them. Before she could stop him, he slipped through the side door and into the hallway. Smoke filled the air, the smell of gunpowder thick. His mind worked faster than fear. Think, Elijah. Think. He ran to his lab and grabbed the Guardian. The device could detect toxins, but it also had a high-frequency alarm that could overload nearby earpieces. He adjusted the setting and hid behind a column. As the first intruder stepped inside, Elijah pressed the trigger. A piercing sound filled the hall, too high for normal ears, but devastating through the assassin's earpieces. They screamed, clutching their heads, stumbling. Elijah ran past them, adrenaline surging. He dashed toward the panic room where his mother was hiding, but another man appeared from the side, gun raised. Elijah froze. Before the man could shoot, bang. The attacker fell. Antonio Rossi stood behind him, smoke rising from his pistol. Boss, Elijah gasped. Antonio's coat was soaked, his face cold as steel. You okay, kid? Elijah nodded breathlessly. They tried to take us. Antonio's jaw clenched. I know. I tracked them here. The Santinos sent them. I told them they'd regret it. Suddenly, another gunman appeared behind Antonio. Elijah didn't think. He grabbed a metal tool and hurled it with all his strength. It hit the man's wrist, the gun flying from his hand. Antonio spun and fired once. Silence fell. Elijah was shaking. Antonio looked at him, and for the first time, the Mafia boss smiled faintly. You've got guts, kid. And brains. Within minutes, more guards arrived, sirens echoing in the distance. The attack was over. But the message was clear. This wasn't the end. Later, as dawn broke, Antonio sat in the living room with Elijah and Mariah. The fire crackled softly. They wanted you because you embarrassed them, Antonio said. You healed what they tried to destroy. That made you a threat. Elijah looked down. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to help. Antonio shook his head. Never apologize for saving lives. The world needs more men like you. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. This was my father's, he said, handing it to Elijah. Inside was a gold ring with the Rossi family crest. Your family now? Not by blood, by honor. Mariah's eyes filled with tears again. Sir, we can't accept. Antonio cut her off gently. You can, and you will. Elijah stared at the ring, speechless. Thank you, sir. Antonio smiled. Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. Never let this world change who you are. Your mind is your weapon, but your heart, that's your real strength. That night, as Elijah lay in bed, his mind buzzed with thoughts. He had come from nothing, the son of a cleaning lady, and now he was sitting in the house of a man who once ruled with fear, being treated like a son. He looked at the Guardian on his desk, still blinking softly. A device born out of desperation now had the power to save millions. He whispered to himself, maybe this is just the beginning. But in the dark corners of the city, the Santino family wasn't finished. They had failed to kill him once, but they weren't done yet. The next move they planned wouldn't just threaten Elijah's life. It would test his genius, his courage, and his heart in ways he never imagined. A week later, the city buzzed with whispers. Everyone in the underworld had heard the same unbelievable story. Antonio Rossi's daughter lived, and the boy who saved her wasn't a doctor, wasn't a mobster, but the son of a cleaning lady. To some, it was a miracle. To others, an insult. The Santino family's plan had failed, and their pride was bleeding. In a dark warehouse on the outskirts of town, Santino's men gathered around their boss. We missed our chance, one of them said nervously. The Rossi girl's alive. The boy's protected. Santino's eyes burned like cold fire. Then we take away his protection. We hit where it hurts. The next day, Antonio prepared for a charity gala downtown, a public event to show the city that the Rossi name was stronger than ever. Elijah had been invited too, wearing his first real suit. He looked uncomfortable, but proud. Isabella beamed beside him, her hand lightly brushing his arm. You look handsome, she said. He smiled shyly. You look healthy. She laughed softly. Thanks to you. Antonio watched them from a distance, the faintest smile on his lips. They remind me there's still good left in this world, he said quietly to Marco. But across the street, unseen eyes were watching. A sniper adjusted his scope. In the back of a delivery van, another man armed a small drone, its belly packed with explosives. Their target wasn't the boss this time, it was the boy. Inside the ballroom, the event sparkled with music and laughter. Elijah was nervous, surrounded by men in suits and women in glittering gowns. He had never seen so much wealth in one place. But he wasn't here for that. In his jacket pocket, he carried the final version of the Guardian, now perfected, smaller, faster, flawless. He planned to show it to Antonio later that night. Suddenly, the device beeped, a warning signal. Elijah frowned, pulling it out discreetly. The screen glowed red, toxic compound detected. His heart jumped. He turned slowly, scanning the room. His device pointed toward the ventilation ducts. He whispered, "No, not again." Without a second thought, he ran to Antonio. "Sir, we have to clear the room, now." Antonio blinked. "What?" "Toxin, in the air vents. Someone's trying to poison everyone." Antonio didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand against the fire alarm. "Everyone out. Now." The music stopped. People screamed, running for the exits. Guards spread out instantly. Elijah's scanner beeped faster, the toxin concentration rising. Then, through the glass window above, a small drone appeared, its red light blinking rapidly. "Down!" Elijah shouted. Antonio grabbed Isabella and threw himself over her just as the drone exploded. The blast shattered windows, sending fire and debris across the hall. Elijah hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Smoke filled the air. Through the chaos, Santino's men stormed in, guns raised. "Find the boy," one yelled. Elijah crawled behind a fallen table, coughing. His device was cracked, but still working. He used it to track the chemical signatures. They were coming closer. He had seconds. He reached for a gas tank near the catering stand, twisted the valve, and grabbed a candle from a broken chandelier. The flame caught instantly. He whispered, "For Mom." "For Isabella." He rolled the tank toward the attackers and dove behind the bar. The explosion ripped through the floor, blinding light and heat. When the dust settled, Antonio's men had regained control. The attackers were down, some unconscious, others fleeing into the night. Antonio stumbled up, coughing, his face bleeding slightly. "Elijah, where's the boy?" "Here," Elijah shouted, emerging from the smoke. He helped Isabella stand, his own suit torn and burnt. "Everyone's safe." The toxins burned off. Antonio stared at him. This kid, barely 17, standing in the middle of destruction with the calm of a warrior and the heart of a saint. "You saved us again," he said quietly. Elijah shook his head. "No, sir. I just refused to let them win." The sound of sirens filled the air as police and paramedics arrived. Antonio turned to Marco. "No one touches this kid." He's under my name from this day on." Later, as dawn broke, they stood outside the ruined hall. The city skyline glowed gold in the early light. Isabella leaned against Elijah, smiling through tears. "You're crazy," she whispered. "But you're my hero." He blushed. "I'm just glad you're alive." Antonio approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've got a rare gift, Elijah. You don't just heal bodies, you heal hearts. You reminded a man like me that there's still hope, even in a world built on fear." Elijah looked up. "You gave me a chance, sir. That's all I ever wanted." Antonio smiled, his voice deep and sincere. "You earned it. And from today on, whatever you build, whatever you dream, I'll make sure the world knows your name." Months later, headlines flashed across the news. Teenage genius develops device that detects deadly poisons in seconds. From cleaning lady's son to medical prodigy, Elijah Mariah's story inspires millions. Elijah's invention, the Guardian, was now being used in hospitals, airports, and even the military. His name had become a symbol of hope, proof that greatness could rise from anywhere. At the grand unveiling ceremony, Antonio and Isabella sat in the front row. As Elijah stepped up to the podium, cameras flashing, he paused for a moment, eyes scanning the crowd until they found his mother's proud face. He smiled. "I once thought heroes wore suits, carried guns, or had power. But I learned that real power isn't fear, it's compassion. It's using what you have to save others, even when no one believes in you." The audience rose to their feet in applause. Cameras clicked. Antonio's eyes glistened as he whispered, "That boy changed everything." Later, as the event ended, Isabella found Elijah backstage. "So, what's next for the genius who saved the mafia boss's daughter?" she teased. Elijah smiled softly. "Maybe just saving the world, one life at a time." She laughed, slipping her hand into his. "Then I guess I'll be there to remind you to eat and sleep." As they walked toward the exit, sunlight pouring in through the tall glass doors, the boy who once cleaned floors now walked among giants. But his heart was still humble. And somewhere deep inside, Antonio Rossi watched them go, a faint smile on his scarred face. "A cleaning lady's son," he murmured, "who healed what money, power, and fear could not." Because in the end, it wasn't a doctor, a billionaire, or a boss who brought back the light. It was a boy with nothing except brilliance, courage, and love. And that was enough to change everything. If this story touched your heart, remember, real power isn't money or fame. It's kindness, courage, and never giving up. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because more life-changing stories like this are coming your way.